Welcome to our class, The Bible is History. This is our sort of inaugural screencast, putting together the ideas that we'll be wrestling with through the year. I'm Ed Utz. I'll be your tutor as we walk through this. And basically the requirements for the course will be watching these screencasts as they're listed for you in Canvas, including writing a paragraph or so on our discussion board along the way, and commenting on what other students are writing. We'll have a weekly quiz based on what we're reading and what we're watching, just to keep you up and keep you honest with where we are. There'll be 2 semester exams, each covering only that semester's activities, and then there will be 2 projects in the fall, 2 projects in the spring, which I will give you a truckload of ideas, and you can choose the 2 that you want for the fall and the 2 that you want for the spring to develop. So that'll be the requirements for the course. By and large, though, I hope to give you a better understanding of Israel, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, including the Maccabean period, and including how Israel in the New Testament and the Old Testament interacted with her neighbor. So we'll spend some time in Egypt, we'll spend some time in Sumer, we'll spend time in Rome and Greece, and in a variety of places as we watch Israel interact with her neighbors. So what I wanted to do to start out is ask just the general question, why study history? If evolution is right, we are the best iteration of human beings that has ever been. And as a result, it tends to cloud our thoughts that maybe somebody in the past had some better ideas. And so hopefully we're not that proud, that we could look at the events of the past, the people of the past, and learn from them in such a way that it would help make a difference in our lives today. So what I've done is I've collected some ideas that I'd like to share on, just in an opening fashion, why study history at all. So my first thought is that history gives us perspective. It seems to me our modern culture is pretty blind to the great ideas of the past. There were Roman and Greek philosophers and historians and teachers, as well as Jewish and Christian philosophers and teachers that have given us so much guidance that would help us in our lives, but we tend to be largely ignorant of what they taught. And so hopefully, maybe this class will be the beginning of a corrective in that area. To develop perspective as well in helping us to understand the present times. If this is the era of Facebook and social media and Twitter and social engagement in politics like that, we are a pretty shallow culture. And so seeing the longer view of history can help us better understand our present times. It can also help us to discover those shifts when, over the course of history, there is a shift in worldview from one idea to another. For example, Barack Obama, in a speech overseas, happened to mention that America was not a Christian nation, that at least it was no longer, he said, what it once was. And he's indicating a shift in worldview from what was thought before to a new way of thinking, and by and large, he's right. Finally, to develop perspective, looking at the past gives us guidance and direction for the present. Right? We don't have to learn everything by experience. If other people have made the kinds of decisions we're thinking about making and it didn't turn out well, we would be wise not to follow in their footsteps. So if we can watch other people do what is right, do what is wrong, and we can learn from their experience, it's like a whole vicarious lifetime stretched out indefinitely. So we study history in order to develop perspective for living our own lives. We also study history to better understand the nature of man. Scripture here is kind of unique. If you read the documents of the ancient world, they often describe military victories, They talk about all of the good things that this or that political leader or hero did, but they often, at least if it's in the court annals, the successes are there, but not the failures. It's different in Scripture when we look at it. We will see David as he defeats Goliath. We will see David as he puts together an incredible cache of wealth to build the temple with. We'll also see David, though, in his sin with Bathsheba. We'll see David in his sin by counting the military men to describe the power of Israel outside of its trust and reliance on God. So we'll see examples of heroes with failings. One of the most unique letters that we'll read is a letter that's buried in the middle of Daniel. It's Daniel chapter 4, and it is the story of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who is telling the story himself to all the nations that are under his authority about what God did in his life. So it's a pretty unique document. And so we'll be taking a look at that. And then we'll see stories of men like Cyrus, who did incredible things, including freeing the Jewish people to return to their homeland, and doing it because he wanted them to be free to pray for him and his sons. Pretty interesting. Can't wait to get through those stories with you along the way. Another reason for studying history, at least for the Christian, is that history displays the providence of God. In the postmodern world, we're afraid of anything that smacks of meta-narrative, of purpose from beginning to end. But that is what we get in Scripture. That is, we get a description of history and the providence of God dealing with his people, whether it's Israel in the Old Testament or the church in the New Testament. God is reigning over the decisions of men and turning things however he pleases. The king's heart, Scripture says, is in the hands of the Lord, and he turns it however he pleases. So we will watch the way in which God manages his affair with all men. His affairs with all men. It's interesting when you look at some of the Greek and Roman gods. They're incredibly capricious. But the God of Scripture is much more consistent in the way he behaves. People know how to behave in a way to be blessed, and know how to behave in a way to suffer judgment. And he lays it out. The blessing and judgment of God is all there consistently to be known. And then we learn about the nature of men, finding that even though they know the way that is right to do in order to be blessed, they choose a different way. So for us, history displays the providence of God. History also, by studying history, we learn the tools and the process that is involved in the discipline. We learn some of the primary and secondary sources. We learn how people use history, and oftentimes by learning the proper way to approach the discipline of the historian, we help to protect that discipline from political or social activism. So when we look at it like that, we are doing a real service to help understand how history works and then be able to approach the topic honestly.